En plebes unum presentas elecciones presidenciales en la historia mexicana. The 19th official presidential election in Mexican history took place on July 1st, 2012, 2 days before my 12th birthday. Anyways, Calderon immediately went to work after he was elected. 10 days after he was inaugurated, he officially declared war on the Mexican drug cartels, which made his popularity rise in its early years, but didn't exactly help keep him popular for too long after, as the murder rate skyrocketed during his tenure, with 60,000 deaths directly related to the drug war. Another early problem during his administration was the rise in the price of corn, which led to the inflation of tortilla prices. Since the poorest people in Mexico love their tortillas, Calderon had to make the Tortilla Price Stabilization Pact in order to help them. The Great Recession also started to take effect in Mexico, leading to a 4.7% drop in their GDP, but he was able to bounce back. He also made a law that would lower the salaries of all public servants, but would raise the salaries of Mexican police and army. But the most popular policy that he implemented was the creation of Seguro Popular, a universal public health insurance plan that expanded healthcare to 100 million Mexicans. One thing I should also mention is that Calderon was apparently an alcoholic and would occasionally be drunk during appearances not only in Mexico but in foreign places as well. In the Chamber of Duties, despite a massive Voto El Blanco movement to boycott the three major parties, the PRI still ended up being the winner of the night. With all that out of the way, let's move on to the election itself. First, we're going to start off with the New Alliance Party. They had originally wanted to form a coalition with the PRI, even full-on announced that they were going to form one. However, they later decided to break off with the PRI due to internal conflicts. While they did have talks with the PAN to form a coalition, they ultimately decided that it was best for them to once again go it solo, nominating former environmental advisor to President Cedillo, Gabriel Cuadri de la Torre, as their candidate. He ran under the slogan, "Do we count on you?" The remaining three parties had pretty extensive primary processes to follow. First, we'll start off with the PRD. Two people actively sought the PRD nomination. First was Mexico City Mayor Marcelo Ebrard, who would run for president as the candidate of a PRD faction called the New Left. Meanwhile, the heads of the PRD had already made up their mind on wanting to renominate AMLO to be their candidate. Meanwhile, AMLO was like, nah, bro, we gotta do it the same way we did it last time. So they held an internal party primary poll to see which of the two actually had momentum in the party. Both pledged that they would drop out and endorse whoever wins the internal primary poll in order to have a united front. Meanwhile, Cuauhtémoc Cárdenas decided to jump into the fray. While not explicitly entering the race, he stated that he'd be open to be the PRD candidate if the polls indicated that he would win and if he didn't have to compete against AMLO and Ebrard. The polls had AMLO as the most candidate, so Ebrard dropped out and endorsed him. As an olive branch to the Ebrard wing of the party, AMLO stated that if he won the presidency, Ebrard would be a member of the cabinet. AMLO formed a coalition with the Citizens Movement, a rebranded Convergence, and the Labor Party, called the Broad Progressive Front, and ran under the slogan, "The real change is in your hands." Next, we'll talk about the PRI. It was speculated that Mexican Senator Manlio Fabio Beltrones would seek their nomination. In fact, he was seen as a very popular contender for the nomination, but he decided to not seek the party's nomination, paving the way for Governor of Mexico State Enrique Peña Nieto to step up to the plate. He ran uncontested for the nomination and formed a coalition with PVM called the Commitment to Mexico and ran under the slogan, "My commitment is with you and with Mexico." And lastly came the PAN, who also decided to go it solo. As they had the most to lose during this election, they needed a good enough candidate to keep the momentum of the last two presidents going. As such, 6 people stepped up to the plate. First was Governor of Jalisco, Emilio Gonzalez Marquez, Secretary of Education, Alonso Lujambio, and Secretary of Labor, Javier Lozano Alcaron. all of whom dropped out before the primary ended. The ones who stayed in the primary till the end were Santiago Creel, making another run for the presidency, Secretary of Finance and Public Credit Ernesto Cordeiro, and former Chamber of Duties member and cabinet member in the last two administrations, Josefina Vázquez Mota. Vázquez ended up winning the nomination, and she ran under the slogan, "The woman has a word." There was talk of former Chamber of Duties member and son of former PAN presidential candidate Manuel Cratheiro Carrillo running as an independent, but as stated in the previous video, that was not allowed. The biggest issues of the campaign were the drug war and corruption. As such, each candidate had to emphasize their various plans to tackle these issues. Peña Nieto promised to reduce the amount of violence brought on by the drug war, while reassuring that he would still be aggressive to the cartels. Bit of a mixed bag in issues. Vázquez promised that life sentences to any politicians found guilty of corruption related to organized crime, whereas AMLO and Quadri took more maverick positions on the issues. Quadri openly stated that he would be in favor of decriminalizing drugs, whereas AMLO proposed a plan entitled Hugs Not Bullets, which would not only call for the decriminalization of drugs, but also would try to stop the violence within Mexico and focus on tackling the root of the problem via social programs. Quadri decided to be even more of a maverick and be the only candidate in this election to openly call for the legalization of same-sex marriage. But the one candidate that everybody seemed to have a very controversial viewpoint of, no matter who you asked, was Peña Nieto. Some saw him as a young, charismatic glimmer of hope, while others saw him as same old PRI, but with a more appealing paint job. Not helped by the fact that during a campaign appearance at a university, he was asked a question about an incident during his gubernatorial tenure where he ordered state police to quell protests, which ended up with protesters being beaten, raped, and murdered by the police. And Nieto responded saying, "Look, the Supreme Court said it's okay, so I'm all good here." And when the students protested Peña Nieto's response, the media said, No, you don't understand. You see, these protests, they weren't actually like protests of the students. These are just paid off actors by leftist groups. The students actually really liked Peña Nieto. And 131 of the students responded to this by posting a video of them showing their student IDs and openly stating, "We were there at the protest, we don't like Nieto," which led to a huge movement across Mexico called Yo Soy 132, where students all across Mexico define themselves as the 132nd student. This movement evolved to not only being a mass protest movement against Peña Nieto, but also the alleged media bias in his favor, and called for the process to be more democratic and open, especially with the presidential debates, the first of which wasn't nationally syndicated. Nieto was seen by many in the media as the victor of the debate, though the debate did change one aspect. Originally, people considered Vázquez to be Nieto's prime opposition, but AMLO's better performance in the debate solidified him as the major antithesis to Nieto. The Yo Soy 132 movement's calls for an open debate was heated as the second debate was nationally televised, albeit on news networks like Televisa and TV Azteca, networks that were seen as pro-Nieto. They even managed to get a third debate held, but it was held online, a thing that the average Mexican household did not really have at the time. So the Yo Soy 132 movement didn't necessarily see this as an accomplishment. By the media standards, the race was pretty much a done deal for Nieto, as he was polling double digits ahead of all of his opponents. It was so much of a done deal, Vicente Fox ended up endorsing Nieto over the PAN's candidate. But, right before the election, a bombshell hit. Remember when the Yo Soy 132 movement accused the media of playing favoritism towards Peña Nieto? Well, The Guardian published a series of articles showing that their accusations were 100% true, and that Televisa was actually selling positive coverage to Peña Nieto and was explicitly plotting against AMLO throughout the entirety of the campaign. It was even discovered that many of the supporters for Nieto was indeed manufactured, especially by the use of bots on social media called the Peña bots, though the revelation may have come way too late. And here are the results. Peña Nieto won with 38.2% of the vote. AMLO got a close second with 31.6% of the vote. Vasquez got 23.39% of the vote. And Quadri received 2.28% of the vote. Into the Chamber of Duties, the Commitment of Mexico got 241 seats. The Broad Progressive Front got 135 seats. The PAN got 114 seats. And the New Alliance Party got 10 seats. AMLO once again contested the election results due to the prior accusations, plus accusations that the PRI had bought votes of many people on election day by using prepaid bank cards and pre-marked ballots. AMLO demanded a full recount and even said that he wanted this election invalidated. Protests broke out, but the most that they got was another partial recount of the election. So things eventually moved on. However, by November of that year, AMLO had announced that rather than trying to get the Yo Soy 132 movement to join up with the PRD, he would instead form a new political party in order to try and translate this momentum into political action. Will this party end up doing anything of value? Well, te veré para las próximas elecciones, amigo. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and click that bell to be notified when the future video mine comes out. And if you're interested in more content from me, you can go to my website or follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Twitter, join my Discord, or check out my articles on the Independent Political Report.